The World Handicap system came into effect at the end of last year, but since then, many golfers haven't had the opportunity to play an awful lot. So we thought now is a good opportunity to offer something of a refresher. So what you're going to watch is a conversation between myself and Fergus Bisset, one of the Golf Monthly contributors, where we talk about the system, talk about some of the things that you may have already forgotten about it, so that when you do get back to playing golf, you understand how your handicap is going to be calculated and just how the whole process is going to work as you plot your way through the 2021 season. So let's get started looking at the World Handicap system and the 6 things you may have already forgotten about it. Okay, Ferg, so let's talk about the World Handicap system. So before we get into the 6 things that people need to remember about it, can you just give us one paragraph on what it is and why it's come in?
The idea is basically to make handicaps truly portable, to make for a fairer and more equitable system of accurately calculating a golfer's current playing ability.
Right, okay.
For us, the big difference is that we're moving from a system that used an aggregate to calculate your handicap to one that now uses an average of your scoring to calculate your handicap.
So it should be then a little bit more appropriate for how you're currently playing?
I think that is exactly the objective. I think handicaps will be more fluid. There's definitely more opportunity for handicaps to move up and down in a shorter space of time under the WHS than under the previous system. So that should be a good thing. And hopefully it makes people enjoy the game more if they feel that they've got a handicap that's representative of how they're actually playing at that time.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with point number 1 then, on the 6 things that people may have forgotten about.
Right. Yeah.
I think, and this is the most important thing for people to know, is handicap index, isn't it? What is it and how is it calculated?
Okay. Yeah, you're right. This is the key number in the World Handicap system. It's calculated from an average of the best 8 of your last 20 returned scores. When a new score is submitted, handicap index is automatically recalculated and updated at the end of that day, and it'll be ready for use the next day, the new handicap index that you have. For those of us who have played a lot of golf, we'll have 20 scores in there, and it's quite easy to calculate. For those who are new to golf or are looking to get a first handicap, they'll need to put scorecards in amounting to 54 holes, and they can be 18 hole rounds or 9 hole rounds. An initial handicap index will be provided then, and then when they've got 20 scores, a fully developed handicap index will come into effect for them.
So you wrote a piece for Golf Monthly about the kind of initial reactions to what the World Handicapping system. Were people finding that, let's say you played off a handicap of 12 under the previous system, were they on the whole finding themselves going, their handicap index was slightly above that or below that? What was the kind of feedback that you were receiving from people?
Well, I mean, obviously, one of the reasons that we're doing this is because people didn't have an awful lot of time after the November the 2nd implementation to see the effects. But some people had a chance to get out there, and those lucky enough to live north of the border have had a bit more time when the weather is permitted. We did a survey on the forum, and it was quite interesting. We got 49% of the respondents said that their initial handicap index had come down when it was implemented. Only 20% had said it had gone up. So it seems that the majority of our readers, anyway, have seen a wee reduction in handicap. And perhaps talking about the best 8 of 20, it does seem that the lower handicappers who do perform a bit more consistently have come down a little more than the higher handicappers who are a bit more erratic and are struggling to perhaps have 8 good scores in their 20 that keep them at their current level or actually bring them down. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the first full playing season, really.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what people think and what people's experiences are. So if you do have any comments, please do leave them below. There are a couple of mechanisms, the soft cap and the hard cap, aren't they? Just to make sure the system is as fair as possible. Can you just give us a quick one line on those as well?
Yeah, no,
they're important, aren't they?
That's one of the concerns that people have had, is that it's going to be crazy wild swings of handicap. Someone's going to be playing off 5 one week and 15 the next week. That's not going to happen. As you say, there's a soft cap and a hard cap to prevent those wild variations, upward variations in particular. It's not going to affect, if you have great playing, then you're going to come down accordingly. But the soft cap basically is based on a player's lowest handicap index in a 1-year period. And if their handicap goes 3 shots above that low index, any further rises are reduced by 50%.
Right.
That's the soft cap. And the hard cap is if a player's handicap moves above that low index in the 12-month period by 5 shots, that's it. No further rises in that year.
Right.
So
Fine.
that prevent people from going really sort of having massive swings.
On to our second point, which is course handicap.
Right.
What is the course handicap, and why is it important for people to know what it is?
Well, this is pretty much the number of shots that you're actually going to be receiving. Handicap index is important as that baseline number, as we talked about. But the course handicap is when you visit a course, you will use your handicap index and the difficulty of the course to give you a course handicap that you will play off for that day. And it may vary actually even between the tees on a particular course. So you have to take that into account. If you know what your handicap index is, every club now has a slope rating sheet and a course handicap chart that you can quite easily see what you're going to be playing off. And all the calculations when you enter scores are done by the computer, and you really don't need to concern yourself too much unless you're particularly interested in all the mathematical equations that go on behind the scenes.
Okay, Fergus. Well, that brings us neatly on to the next part, which is about slope rating, which I think is really important for people to know. Can you just, what is the slope rating, and what do people need to know about it?
Well, slope rating is effectively the difficulty of a golf course off a particular set of tees. It's a calculation that uses a couple of numbers, and we've done pieces on the Golf Monthly website that if you want to find out more, you can go into the nitty-gritty of it. But
You'll put some links in below.
But fundamentally, yes, the difficulty of a golf course, with 113 being the average for an averagely difficult golf course. Anything above 113 up to a maximum of 155 for more difficult golf courses, and anything below 113 to a minimum of 55 for easier golf courses.
Yeah, so people should expect to get fewer shots on courses that are slightly below the 113, more shots on golf courses that are slightly above the 113. I think that's the simplest way of doing it, because it can get quite into the nitty gritty, can't you? But if you are interested, as I said, we'll put in some links below. Question for you then, Fergus, is that, and it brings me on to the next point, which is about general play. So I always thought that with the world handicapping system, the idea was that people put more of their scorecards in so that it was a fairer reflection of how they're playing at any given moment. Is that the case?
That is a really good question. And it was a key objective behind the implementation of the WHS was to get people to put more scores in. No question about that. And for it to be as effective as possible, it's important that we do put in as many scores as possible for handicap calculation, not just competitions, general play, as you mentioned there as well. And that way we will get a handicap index which is as representative as possible of how we're playing at any given moment. But you don't have to. In this country, we have decided that a general play score can be submitted for a social game of golf, but you have to pre-register before the round for it to count. If you haven't pre-registered, it won't count. It's not a counting general play score. So if you want to go out and just have a match with your pals, or you just really fancy practicing, then that's absolutely fine. But I think you should be encouraged to look at the option for putting general play scores in as and when it is possible to do so, just because it will give you a more accurate handicap.
And do you know, one of the things I was thinking about this that could really help golfers is that you become more used to just playing under the pressure of putting a score together. I think sometimes for people like me, I've certainly fallen foul of this over the years. I play 90% of my golf is friendly golf, just with friends.
Yeah.
Never really playing under a huge amount of pressure. And then I play under pressure and it's panic stations when I'm faced with a really tight tee shot, or there's water in front of the green, and you start second guessing everything you're doing, whereas you can get used to that if you're just put under that little bit more pressure on a far more regular basis. So number 5 on our list, what happens if we go out to play and the weather is just horrific? It's blowing 40-mile-an-hour winds, chucking it down with rain. Is there any kind of allowance made in that scenario?
It would have been in the old system. CSS comes into effect there, and it basically will reflect the conditions of the day. And particularly in this country where we have weather like that, the RNA in particular are very keen that the system has a caveat, a method to determine what the conditions have been, and they have one called playing conditions calculation, and it basically it works in effect like CSS. It looks at how all players who have entered a score on that course of each particular set of tees has performed that day against their expected performance. And so if everyone has struggled, then the system takes that into account. Likewise, if it's been a perfect day and the scoring's been good, yeah, you'll find that the equivalent CSS would come down.
Okay, so the final one then is actually a really good point I thought that you made in the piece that you wrote about it, which was just that not to worry too much. You don't need a calculator for any of this stuff. It's actually, it's not down to you to know all of the ins and outs of how the whole system works, is it?
No, that's right. I mean, the one thing that you will be doing is if you go to play a course, you know what your handicap index is. You check on the board at the course you're playing at what your course handicap will be. But that's pretty much it. And even then, if you enter probably on your device or when we've got the apps all working, you enter that you're playing on a particular course of a particular set of tees, and the system will work out your handicap for you anyway, because it knows what the course rating is, and it knows what the slope rating is, and it knows what your handicap index is. So effectively, if you want to be blissfully ignorant and just have a number beside your name, that's fine. If you want to get into the details of it, as we've mentioned before, we've written pieces, we can put another link in perhaps below to give you all the crazy calculations that are going into it. But yeah, fundamentally, you don't need to do anything. You just need to turn up, enter your scores, and submit. You have to have a playing partner to confirm the scores as per the system before. You can't just go out and put scores in willy-nilly and say, right, I've just shot 62, submit. You've got to have someone to countersign it for you. But the system will calculate it, and you'll have a adjusted playing handicap ready for the next day.
Yes, it's a really important point, this, because it can seem when people listen to this video like it's super complicated. And in one level, I guess it is quite complicated because it has to be, because golf is played on this giant natural landscape and every golf course is different. And every set of tees you play a golf course from is different. So you have to have a way of making it fair for everybody to compete against each other. I think this system does it. And it can seem complicated, but actually you don't need to worry too much about the complications. You just need to know what's your handicap index, what's the course handicap, and then go from there, really.
This is very new. It's only, most of us have only had 1 month of playing under it before winter and COVID regulations took us off the course. So we'll give it this season and see what the effects are. But I think people will come to understand the basics of the system really quite quickly, because, fundamentally, it is quite straightforward.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate that. I think for those people watching this, it's a really helpful run through of all of those things you'll need to just have in the back of your mind about the World Handicapping System. If you do have any comments about it or any questions you'd like us to answer, please do leave those comments below. We'll get back to as many of you as we can. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.